Hey, my name is Yishai Fleischer. I'm the international spokesman for the Jewish community of Hebron.
Thank you for that, Yishai. Let's just start by the location that we're in. Can you explain to us the significance of this place?
Well, you're at a very historic and beautiful site. This is actually a 2,000-year-old building on top of tombs that are 3,800 years old. This is where Abraham purchased a plot of land. He buried his beloved wife Sarah. It later became the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob and Leah, all in one mausoleum. Jacob's other name is Israel. So therefore, it's really where the tomb of Abraham is, where Israel is. And also, it's a 2,000-year-old building. So a Jewish king named Herod built this building 2,000 years ago. It's been added on to throughout time. But it's a Jewish building on top of Jewish tombs. And the Jewish people have been living at this town and praying here at this tomb for the last 3,500 years.
It strikes me as this is, indicative of, I guess, this broader region. And this has significance to multiple faiths, the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith, the Christian faith, and it's all in one location there as well. It's an interesting place in that regard, isn't it?
Oh, it's fabulously interesting. It's Abraham, the Abrahamic faiths. So it's something that should be bringing people together. But oftentimes places like this actually make people jealous and tear them apart. But the fact is, this is the father of many nations, Abraham, and many people watching your program care about, the Abrahamic tradition.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about some of the tensions, maybe not necessarily just here, but how this community, as you live in this community, how you see people coexisting here at the moment.
Well, Jewish people have lived in this town sometimes as an ethnic majority and other times as an ethnic minority. Today we're an ethnic minority. And we survive because we have an IDF that defends us. And there's a jihadism that has taken root in the Arab world around us. And so there's always that tension. On the other hand, there's also efforts to reduce tension. For example, this nearby neighborhood is called Jabri, and we have decent relations with them. And for example, Ashraf Jabri, the Mukhtar, the kind of the caretaker of this whole neighborhood, he arranged for, when my daughter had a bat mitzvah, had her ascension to womanhood, we celebrated it here at the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs, and he helped me organize fireworks from the Arab community to shoot overhead. So we do try to have normalization, but that normalization comes through the understanding that Israel's got to be strong on its land.
There'd be some who maybe haven't been to this location or been to Hebron more broadly, into Israel and the Palestinian territories, who would think that there's a, for want of a better phrase, a chicken and egg argument, which is actually the cause of the tension there. You've cited a jihadism that you've pointed to there. There would be many people who look at the way that the Jewish presence here works with the IDF, with the large fences, with the weapons and things like that, and say that actually exacerbates the tension here. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, Matt, let's just put down our weapons and everything's going to work out, right, Matt? 1929, there was a horrible October 7th style massacre here. It destroyed the Jewish community. Jews were burnt in ovens. Jews were raped and murdered, pillaged. And so, yeah, we keep our guns so that we can stay defended. And I think it's kind of absurd and humorous, the idea that Israel, that has been attacked so many times by Arab armies and by jihadist, secular jihadism and religious jihadism against the Jewish people, that if we just lay down our arms, things are going to work out. I guess maybe that sounds nice in Australia, but it doesn't work here in the Middle East. And so we are an ethnic minority, we are a protectorate, we are a reservation, if you will, and the only way for us to survive is to be strong here. That's the only way to make it.
So do you think the international community misunderstands the situation here, and that's why there is so much criticism of Jewish settlers, if that's the term you want to use?
I think there's definitely misunderstanding. I think people don't know the basic map of the Middle East. They don't understand that there's over 50 Muslim countries and that there's 22 Arab countries and one tiny New Jersey-sized Jewish state. They don't understand that Israel's a protectorate, like I said before. They don't understand that it's a tiny island kind of state. And if people understood that better, maybe they would react differently. Also, there's probably a smidgen of anti-Semitism. You know, Jewish people have faced anti-Semitism for 3,000 years. So, you know, there's probably something to it. You know, people don't always like the Jews or want to see Jewish people strong or Jewish power. And so they pick on Israel. I mean, if the world would be objective, they would see what's happening all over the world, and how many people are murdered in this region. For example, this guy Jolani, right? This guy Jolani, the leader of Syria. Just not so long ago, he did a pogrom on the Alawites and on the Druze, you know, killing and objectifying people in a horrible fashion, making them crawl on the floor and then cutting off their beards, killing them. All kinds of awful stuff, but nobody cares. When Israel does something, there is a kind of bias against Israel. People pick on Israel for whatever reason. So there's definitely misunderstanding and ignorance on the one hand, and there's anti-Semitism on the other hand.
I guess when we're talking about some of the violence that we've seen in this community in recent times, but over many years, there was the incident here back in the mid-90s where a settler stormed this complex and opened fire on worshippers. Could you remind us what happened there?
This is a place that has tensions, and if you want, we could do it in the context of the thousands of anti-Israel jihadist attacks, and then talk about the one time that a Jewish person acted against the law and murdered those people. We could do that, but let's keep it in context. This is a tense region. And the very question that you asked belies a certain unequal representation. If you would have said to me, let's talk about the violence on both sides, let's talk about terrorism, but you want me to talk about one specific act of Jewish terrorism against the Arabs, but that's not the situation, is it? In that very time, with the story that you're referring to, there were hundreds of incidents against Jews, and tens of Jews were murdered here. Okay, and yeah, there was this awful story on the other side. But the bottom line is that we have to look at it in context and not take it out of context. Taking it out of context and focusing on one story is a form of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. How do you see the current debate playing out around Israeli sovereignty over parts of the West Bank? And it seems like there is a real push in some corners of the Israeli community for Israeli sovereignty to be applied, but then we're hearing from the United States, the Trump administration, saying that should not happen. How do you see that dynamic playing out at the moment?
Look, I am part of the so-called settler movement. We see ourselves as resettlers, people returning to our land. Again, we have a tiny homeland, the heartland of the homeland in this area. This is where Jewish people have lived for thousands of years. We feel very good about coming back to this land. If it's Jerusalem, if it's Hebron, if it's Bethel, etc., these are the very essence of the land of Israel. And the Jewish people are inextricably tied to the land of Israel. We don't believe in a Palestinian state. We don't believe a Palestinian state should exist on our land. There's 22 Arab countries. Jordan is already a Palestinian state. We created a mini Palestinian state in Gaza, and look where that led us. People like myself, people that I represent, don't believe in a Palestinian state, don't believe that it should be here, don't believe that they have national rights. They may have private rights, they have rights to their property, etc., but they do not have a right to a state in this land. This is our land, and they have rights to be residents of the state of Israel, etc., but as long as they respect the fact that this land is the Jewish state. So we've been fighting against elements within our own country and elements internationally that want to take our land away and create a different sovereign here. And we've been fighting that. We're going to continue to fight that, and we're going to be successful at it. If President Trump previously understood that, when there was the Pompeo Doctrine, which recognized Jewish rights in Judea and Samaria, great. If he doesn't understand that, and he doesn't understand that Jewish sovereignty is going to happen here, well, you know, he's not going to be there forever, but we will. And so the Jewish people will continue to be in this land. We'll continue to resettle this land. We're going to continue to grow a presence here. We're going to push back on jihadism. We're going to make this part of Israel, and it's going to be a New Jersey-sized Israel, a small, tiny Israel. All the other countries, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, they're way, way, way bigger, but this tiny land is ours. We're going to make sure that stays that way.
Do you think that the Palestinian population can continue living here, even though you're saying that they shouldn't have rights to statehood?
Absolutely. If you're pro-Israel, if you're a law-abiding citizen who's willing to be governed by the Jewish state, absolutely. Why should that be a problem? There should be no problem with that. Everything from our history and even our religious documents say that. So we have no problem with other peoples living amongst us, but what we have a problem with is a takeover, a hostile takeover of land and politics and teaching jihadism. When you're teaching your children, right, look at the Palestinian school books, you're teaching them to murder Jews in children's school books, then you've lost your legitimacy. So the Palestinian Authority is illegitimate. Hamas is certainly illegitimate. The average Arab who wants to live within Israel, of course he's legitimate, as long as he doesn't call to destroy our Jewish state and respects the laws and the customs of this land.
You use the term hostile takeover there. Do you think that there are some within the settler movement, and you've identified yourself as a member of that? I know it is it's a broad church, for want of a better phrase. But do you
synagogue?
Synagogue. Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me there.
Sure.
Do you think that there are elements within the settler movement who themselves are engaged in hostile takeovers of land at the moment, expanding settlements, outposts, attacking Palestinians? That is a feature of some parts of the movement at the moment, isn't it?
As in all societies, we have members of the society that are more aggressive and maybe take it to illegal actions. We have a police, an army, a governance. We have townships. We have regions that have mayors, and so they'll take care of that. If there's illegal action being done, they'll be taken care of. But that pales in comparison with the hostile takeover of Arabs who have European backing, Australian backing, and are trying to take away our land and do it through either land takeover in the night, taking over hilltops that is illegal, or the amassing of weapons for terrorist acts. That's exactly what happened on October 7th. We have an implacable jihadist enemy that wants to take over this region. They can't stand the fact that there's a Jewish state in this Muslim region. They can't stand the fact that this Jewish faith, which was subdued for so many years, is now risen back up again. It's very frustrating for them theologically and nationalistically, and so they're trying to fight it, and we'll fight them back. And we'll fight all those elements, Europeans, Australians, whoever it is, that wants to support people that want to undermine our presence here.
You pointed there to takeovers of hilltops. That's exactly what some of the settlers are doing.
Well, they're doing it as a reaction. First thing, they're not. Let me say one step back. They're doing it because it's our land. We have every right to this land, and we're going to continue to settle every hilltop on this land. And they're doing it also as a reaction to make sure that there's no Arab takeover, because once Arabs, so-called Palestinians, take over hilltops, it's hard to get them off of it. We have a progressive-leaning Supreme Court, which will back them, and Europeans and Australians will make a big fuss about it. And so we got to make sure to stop them. And so we have a very robust movement, which is backed up by the government, backed up by the local municipalities, backed up by the army and the police to settle our land.
I noticed as we were walking up from the car park here, some of the posters and signage around, posters of the National Security Minister, Mr. Ben-Gvir, who I know is a resident in Kiryat Arba, just over there. He's been targeted by countries, including Australia, sanctioning him for some of his rhetoric, his actions, effectively on behalf of settlers as well. How is that received by members of your community when you hear of countries like Australia targeting people who are representing all of the things that you've just espoused there?
Well, Minister of Security Itamar Ben-Gvir represents a lot more than that. He represents Israel's police, Israel's fire department, Israel's prisons, and Israel's gun rights. He is a powerful minister that has much more than just representative of the settlements. His voters are Sephardic Jews and ultra-Orthodox Jews, and in the peripheral towns, in the desert areas, and many places. So to call him just a representative of the settlers is an absurdity. And to have Australia getting in our business without clearly understanding and eroding our sovereignty by sanctioning our people that are voted for by the huge Israeli public that voted for him is an abhorrent act of sabotage and of entering a space that they shouldn't be entering in, and misunderstanding and anti-Semitism. And it's not that the settlers don't like when Australia gets involved and starts to sanction our leaders. It's the people of Israel. We're disgusted that our supposed ally acts with this irreverence towards our governance and towards our sovereignty and towards our democracy. And it's of course at the end it boomerangs on Australia, because in the end when Australia goes hard against the people who are fighting the jihad here in Israel, well, the jihad comes and takes over Australia, as it already is starting to. And so if you don't want us to do our business to survive, if you're standing against Jewish survival and Jewish rights in the land of Israel, in the end that will boomerang onto you.
Is it an either-or prospect, Jewish survival in exchange for Palestinian survival?
You know what? I'll tell you, Jewish survival is paramount for me because I'm representing the Jewish people, and that's my peoplehood. My peoplehood has been through 2,000 years of persecution. I've got to fight for that. Jihadism wants the destruction of Israel. Read the Hamas documents. Read what the PA puts out every single day about Israel. And so I guess, yes, I guess the answer is it's either Palestine or Israel. But when it comes to places like Australia, I think you should know that the Arabs are okay. They have 400 million Arabs. They have wealthy countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They'll be able, and you know, the Muslim Turks. They'll be able to deal with us 7 million Jews just fine. And you should really not get into our business. I'm sure you have what to do in Australia to make it a safe and prosperous country.
Coming back to what we were discussing before around applying sovereignty or annexation of the West Bank here. Obviously, that we haven't got to that point where the Israeli government is doing that just yet. There was a vote in the Knesset a couple of weeks ago, a very preliminary step there. The Trump administration...
Not very preliminary.
Well, it was the first vote out of four.
Right, but the point is that our Knesset passed the first vote to extend sovereignty. So let's not minimize that.
Sure.
Our Knesset, our governing body, voted to extend sovereignty over Judea and Samaria.
But it was also a smaller cohort within the Knesset who actually voted on it.
That's the way democracy works. It passed.
Of course.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Let's not confuse it for the viewers.
No.
The Knesset passed a preliminary reading for sovereignty in Judea and Samaria.
First vote out of 4. Cool. The Trump administration very quickly came out and said it wasn't going to allow this. Do you believe that Israeli sovereignty can be sort of enforced on this land through the actions of yourself, your colleagues, the IDF, the police, without that sort of formal backing of the Knesset? I guess what I'm saying is annexation already happening through the conduct of settlers, of the Israeli security officials and things like that?
Matt, you know what it's like? It's like being engaged, okay? You're sending out the invitations, there's a dress, there's the photographer, everything is moving in the right direction, okay? They've been dating for a year or two, things are happening, things are going in the right direction, and we know where they're going. The Jewish people are resettling this land. This is the heartland of our story. This is the DNA of our peoplehood. We're connected to this thing inextricably. We're not going to be connected this way to Brooklyn or to Sydney or Melbourne. It's not the same. This is what we've yearned to come back to. We have a deep, unabiding yearning to return to this land. And our peoplehood is showing it more and more. October 7th only quickened and hastened that yearning and that sense that we're going to come back and we're not going to give this land away. So absolutely, the answer to your question, simple answer is yes, we'll continue to build towns. I'm also a councilman in a town nearby. And yes, we are constantly within the law, with our government, pushing to build more pushing to build more infrastructure. We're having more babies. We're teaching them that this is our land. So yes, we're moving forward. We're progressing in this thing, and we're going to push back on jihad. Good people that want to live amongst us, they'll be able to. Haters will have to go. We can't have haters or jihadists in our borders or on our borders. These things are actually quite simple. For the Jewish people to survive in this region, we have to be strong in terms of our identity, in terms of our economy, in terms of our military, in terms of our spirituality. We have to be strong here and push back on forces that want to destroy us.
Okay. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you.
So much. Appreciate it.